Before we start this video, a large thank you to Gustavo, Grumble, Sly Ninja, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, my friend. Hyperverse, Lincoln, Devin, an individual who wishes to remain anonymous. Thank you so much for the support, my friend. It is greatly appreciated, sincerely. Fabio and Mooch for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello, all you lovely people. I hope you're having a wonderful summer's day. So let's go to our player UI prefab here and open that up. What we're going to want to do is duplicate our stamina bar. We're going to make a health system today, by the way. So let's duplicate that, and because we have a layout group right here, it's actually just going to instantly sort this right below the original object. I'm going to drag it above because I want the health bar to be on top of the stamina bar. I'm going to rename this game object to health bar, and then I'm going to go to the vertical layout group and untick child force expand, and what that does is it just basically doesn't make it expand and spread out over the distance of the area. I'm going to change the color to red because it's health. And then I am going to go over now to the status bars, or sorry, the HUD game object, and open up the player HUD manager. Let's copy the serializable field for the stamina bar, and I'm going to rename this to health bar. Likewise, we can simply copy these two functions down here and just replace the word stamina with health, essentially. So if you want to, go on ahead now and pause the video and just set this up, which is the exact same as the stamina bar, and then come right back. If you want to keep going with me, that's cool too, but I encourage you, pause it and go try it right now because I guarantee you can do this yourself. So I'm going to press onward. We're going to rename everything here from stamina to health and max stamina to max health. Now we also have to calculate this too, just like we're calculating our max stamina from a stat. Next, let's actually see where we're actually calling set new stamina value and set max stamina value. So we can kind of work backwards here and kind of follow the trail and do the same thing. So we find our references, we can see this is called on network spawn, which is on the player manager. So let's save this prefab now and open up the player manager. So I'm going to go there now and open it up. You can see here, we're calling it right here. And we're also calling the reset stamina gen timer. So let's go to the the character network manager, and let's make some stats now that will go with our new health bar. So copy and paste endurance, current stamina, and max stamina, and paste it. And again, if you want to go ahead and do this on your own, pause it and go for it. It's the same process, but I'm going to go through it again. If you want to do it, pause it right now. So rename endurance to vitality, rename current stamina to current health, and max stamina to max health. Now, vitality and endurance are more like attributes or stats, and health and stamina are more like resources. So I'm going to make a new header, and I'm going to separate vitality and endurance from our current and max stamina and health. Because again, these are values you have in a health bar that are determined by your stats or a stamina bar. So I'm going to do that so it's more neat. This is just what I like to do. You can do whatever you want. Obviously, if it makes more sense to you another way, then definitely do it that way. Okay, so this looks good. Now let's save again. And now if we go back over to where we were actually calling these on stamina value changed, you can see here we have a comment. This will be moved when we add a save and load system. So let's actually move that as well. But first, let's go to the character stats manager and let's make a function for calculate health based on vitality level. So I'm going to copy and paste the calculate stamina function and change stamina to health. And I'm going to change endurance to vitality. And that's it. It's identical. Now, so it's a little bit different. I'm going to change the value here from like say 10 to 15. But again, this is going to be up to you for however much you want these values to be depending on your game's balance. So I'm just going to put 15 here so it's different than stamina. Okay, looks good. And then I'm going to save that. And now jump back over to the player manager. Now let's copy everything right here below this comment. But first I'll show you what we're going to do with health. We can say player network manager dot max health dot value is equal to player stats manager dot calculate max health based on vitality level, and we pass our player network manager dot vitality dot value, and that's it. But that's not going to go here. So before we go any further, let's copy and paste everything here and move it. So we want to basically set these values every time we load a game. When you load into a game with your character data, you want to set up their max stamina, their max health, their max focus points, whatever you have, you want to set it up from there. So let's paste it down here in the load section. And let's say player network manager dot max health dot value. And instead of passing the player network manager, let's pass character data, current character data dot vitality, and then current character data dot endurance. Don't worry, those aren't variables yet, but we're going to make them in a second. So we're going to get these variables from the character data that we're loading, basically, and that's how we're going to set our max health and stamina. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go to the character save data script, And then let's open that up and add 2 attributes or stats, whatever you want to call them, for vitality and endurance. Also, let's make our resources here too for our health and stamina, because if you want to save the game, let's say you log out let's say you're 300 out of 400 health. Well, you want to save what your current health is too, so we can set that back there as well. And the same thing with your stamina if you'd like. That way you can't cheese the game by logging out and logging back in and resetting your health every single time. So, public int current health. There we go. And then public int current stamina. All right, that's good. Now let's save that. And let's go back over to the load character data and save character data. And on the save character data, now we're going to say current character data dot vitality is equal to player network manager dot vitality level dot value, or vitality dot value, sorry. And then we're going to say character or current character data dot endurance is equal to the player network manager dot current endurance dot value. Okay, so now that's set up, that should all work. But there is a slight problem I'm going to get to momentarily that we're going to address and fix, because it's not important right now, but if we were to try this out right now, it wouldn't work the way we intended it to work. But before we also press on, let's go back down here to the load game data. And before you set your stats, you want to make sure you're setting your vitality and endurance levels as well. So you can say player network manager dot vitality dot value is equal to current character data dot vitality, and then do the same thing with endurance. And then if you wanted to, instead of reading the vitality and endurance from the character data, you could read it from the player network manager. But again, this doesn't matter. Both work. Both would have the exact same result, identical. But you could just paste this here like this. It's the exact same thing because you're setting this up beforehand. So whichever you prefer, whichever makes the most sense to you, go for it. Just like showing multiple ways to do things if I can. So I'm just going to paste all those there like that, and we are good to go. Now we still have a few more things to do in terms of setup. So let's go ahead and do that. And I am going to change current stamina.value equals current character data.current stamina. So when we save a resource, it changes too. And likewise, I'll say player network manager.current health.value. Do this after you set your max, that's important. Is equal to current character data.current health. And then we can save our current health and current stamina too on the save data to character. So right down here, we would simply say current character data dot current health equals player network manager dot current health dot value, and player network manager dot current stamina equals current stamina value. And that's it. So you can see it's just, you're basically putting in the identical framework here, except you're reversing it, obviously saving and loading just being the opposite. So it's pretty straightforward. And when you add new content, you'll get used to adding things here if you aren't already, and it just, again, becomes very, very straightforward. This is going to turn into a much larger function down the line, trust me. So let's go and make these floats for now on our current character save data, because they're both crying that we can't do an int to a float, and I don't want to do a cast. We might just change health to int somewhere down the line, but right now as a float, it's fine because we're always going to round in the future anyway. So that is fine the way it is. So now on network spawn, player manager here, what you want to do is come up here just like you're doing with your stamina. And we're going to say current health on value changed. And we're just going to say set new health value. And that's it. So I'm going to make a comment here just so this is really clear at first glance. We come back to this months later. I'm just going to say that this updates our UI or our stat bars, whatever you want to call it, when our health or stamina changes. Or you can say when a stat changes, brackets health, stamina. In the future, you have focus points or mana, whatever you want to call it. And let's make another comment because we're going to make some more logic. So what we want to do is update our maximum health when our vitality changes, so our vitality stat, or our maximum stamina when our endurance changes. So this will be when you level up, for example. So we want that to auto change for us as well. So we can do that by simply saying player network manager dot vitality dot on value change plus equals. And now what we want to do is actually run the function that we created already, which is player stats manager dot calculate max health depending on vitality level. We can't do that just like that right here. We have to do what we did before. So let's go and make a function for this. So let's erase this, and we can put this anywhere, but I think I'm going to put this on the player network manager because that makes the most sense to me. So I'm going to say player network manager dot, and I'm going to call it set new max health value. And we're going to use this just to call a function we've already made. So let's go over and do the same thing, but instead of vitality, say endurance, and instead of set new max health value, say set new max stamina value. All right, so now let's go over to our character network manager, or our player network manager, if you'd prefer, depending on where you want to have it. I'm going to put mine in the player network manager because only the player is going to access this. I'm going to set the health and stamina of enemies manually. So let's save everything here now, and then go down to the bottom, minimize these functions, jump back over to the player network manager, and let's make the first one. Public void set new max health value. Now, we're going to have to make a float, or an int, for old value, and an int for new value. And then we're going to have to just basically call our function that we've already made. So I'm going to say max health.value is equal to, and you can see here we don't have a reference to our player manager, which is how we get the player stats manager, which is how we get that function. So let's make a player manager variable. Let's override our awake. Make sure you override it and don't just make a regular awake. Let's say player equals get component player manager, and then down here under set new max health value, I'm going to say max health.value is equal to player.player stats manager.calculate health based on vitality level. I'm going to change these variable names to something less ambiguous. Going to change that from old value to old vitality and new value to new vitality, and of course we're passing our new vitality. Now, with that being done, we can change these floats to ints because this is an attribute. That's my bad, not a resource, so it should be an int. Let's copy this whole function and paste it. Set new max stamina value now. And again, replace old vitality and new vitality with old endurance and new endurance. And then max health.value would be max stamina.value. And calculate health based on vitality level would be calculate stamina based on endurance level, and of course we pass our new endurance. Now let's save that, and then we can actually jump away now. And actually, before we jump away, I almost forgot something. What we should do is also set our current health and stamina to our max values, because you're only going to call these functions really when you level up, and when you level up, most people tend to want to refill their character's stats. So I'm going to do that. So current health.value equals max health.value after you've calculated the max, and then do the same thing with stamina. So let's go back to the project now, and let's go over and jump into our UI stat bar. And we're going to add one of these features that we have here as a comment. So variable to scale the stat bar depending on your stats. So it'll get basically longer the higher your stat is. And that adds a sense of progression, which is really cool as well. And it's nice to see changes in the game when your stats actually change as well. So let's make a header for bar options. I'm going to make a serializable field for a protected bool, and this is going to be scale bar length with stats. I'm going to defaultly initialize that at true, and then make a second serializable field for a protected float for the width scale multiplier. And as it suggests, I'm going to initialize it at 1. The bigger this number, the more it's going to increase the width per max value. So down here in set max stat, we're going to simply say if scale bar length with stats, then we're going to come down here and run some logic to manipulate the transform. Well, how do we get the transform of this object? It's a UI element. Well, we're going to want to use a thing called the rect transform. So all we want to do is scale the transform of the object based on this multiplier and the max value. So let's make a private rect transform, and let's just call this a rect transform. We can get it on awake as long as it's on the same game object as this, and mine is. So rect transform equals get component rect transform. If it's on the parent, use get in parent. If it's in the child, use get in child. So down here, we're going to say rect transform dot size delta equals new vector 2, because there's only height and width on the UI elements. And then we're going to say max value times the width scale multiplier, and then we keep the height value the same by saying rect transform dot size delta dot y. So we're only changing the width here. That's it. Now we save that. Let's go over to our player UI manager and open that up. Let's go down now to the health bar. And let's change the multiplier. I'm going to make it something like 1.3 and maybe the stamina 0.7. Or maybe I should make the health bar something a bit bigger, like 2, and maybe the stamina bar like 1.1. Yeah, we'll do that. Just so there's a very clear difference so we can make sure this is working properly. Let's save that now. Let's go over now to our player stats manager. And we have to make a couple more things. Let's make an override awake here. And on that override awake, we are going to say calculate health based on vitality level, and then calculate stamina based on stamina level. And let's make a player manager and a player variable and get that on awake too. Now, why are we doing this? Well, let me describe this while I make this awake method. And let's actually put this on start. So let's actually go to the base class character stats manager, make a start, and then override it. So we can't override start right now because it doesn't exist. So let's jump to the character stats manager. Let's make a protected virtual start, and let's override it on the player stats manager. So why are we doing this? Well, right now we need to calculate this on start because in the future when we select a class, we'll calculate it depending on the class's stats. But right now this is never being calculated, so we need to calculate it somewhere. You understand what I'm saying? There's no function to dictate us selecting a certain set of starting stats yet, so the calculations never happen. So what we need to do is set up a default amount for the vitality and endurance in the player prefab and then calculate it here until we make our character creation screen. So basically it'll just be calculated when the game object is instantiated. So let's do that here and pass our endurance and our vitality values. And this again is on start. And I'm going to make a comment here so it's not confusing. Why calculate these values here? And let's just make something that's pretty simple to understand. When we make a new character, or when we make the character creation menu and set the stats depending on the class, this will be calculated there. And I'm going to say until then, however, stats are never calculated, so we have to calculate them somewhere. Let's do it on the start function. So we do it here. We do it on the load game function as well, but let's just have it here also. So if a save file exists, basically they'll be overwritten right now when loading into a scene, so this would basically become useless. So let's calculate them right there, and then we're going to also make some adjustments to our save and load system. First, let's go to our player, and let's set the default vitality and endurance values. I'm going to set mine to 10, and I see the endurance is already done. Did that before. Cool. Now, if we go into the game and delete our old character, just in case, you can see here that the stamina bar is non-existent and the health bar doesn't appear to be changed. So we've missed a few things. If I actually expand the width of the stamina bar, you can see it's definitely still there. It just has not changed. So let's go over now back into our title screen manager, and let's go all the way down here and go to attempt to create a new game and see what happens. So if you see we attempt to create a new game, we're basically just loading the world right now, and then we're loading game data from current character data. And if we go to that function, what happens? We're trying to get our vitality and endurance level from the current character data, and because the current character data doesn't have any, it's 0, and that makes our bar non-existent. So we have two choices here. We can set up a default value, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do the thing we have to do in the future anyway, and we're just going to do it right now. We're going to make a new private void called new game. This is on World Save Game Manager. And instead of calling it start coroutine, load world scene, we're going to call this new game function. On new game, so this will be selected after you've successfully chosen your class and confirm what you want to do. We're going to save it immediately. Because remember, when the game object is spawned, it calculates the stats, which in the future will be done when you pick a character or a class. So we want to save those stats instantly, so when we load into the world, it's going to load our max stamina and health from the stats we've just selected. So when you make a new game, the first thing you want to do before loading into the world and loading your character data is save the data you currently have, which will be determined by which class you pick. Then you load into the world. So now instead of calling start coroutine load world scene, we call new game. And I believe I touched on this way before when we were making this. I said that we were going to add a function for this. But yeah, that's it. So it's very simple. Just come up to where you have all of these start coroutine load world scenes. This is where you're checking for slots 1 through 10. And just paste new game here instead. And that will work as intended. Apologies if there's noise in the background. My dog's kind of just spinning around right now. So if you hear that, yeah, my bad. So I'm just going to go through all these now and change this to, again, new game. And that looks good. Let's save that. Let's go back into the project here now. And if I go into the game, you can see, yes, the stamina bar doesn't work, but the health bar doesn't work. But why is the stamina bar floating in the middle of the screen? Well, that's because we need to basically update our canvas and reseat the bar after it's been expanded. So let's do that. So what we basically want to do is basically refresh the UI after our bar has been adjusted and the width has been changed. So let's just say player UI manager.instance.player_UID HUD manager.refresh HUD. And let's make that function in a moment because it doesn't exist. I'm making a comment. This just resets the position of the bars, again, based on their layouts group or layout group settings to be more clear, I suppose. Let's go over now to the UI HUD manager, and let's make a function to just basically toggle the HUD real fast. And this is simple. All you gotta do is, I'm gonna call this again refresh HUD. All you gotta do is say health bar dot game object dot set active false and set active true, and do the same thing with the stamina bar. And this simple flick will cause the layout group that's housing them both to kind of reposition them based on their new widths. So it should bind them to the, I believe I have mine set to top left or middle left, I can't recall which. But either way, they should hug the left side of the screen. So let's save that after we've done the stamina and health. And I have a spelling error here, so I'm going to fix that. There we go. Now, if I go into the game, this should work. But before I do that, let's go to the Player UI Manager because I forgot to drag in my health bar variable. So let's go to the HUD, and let's actually go and drag in our health bar and save this prefab. And now it should work. So again, pressing start, loading game, going down to our character, and boom, yes it does. And look at that. It actually also brings us to our last stamina value. So now if I save the game when my stamina is at full, it should load us back into the game with a full stamina bar. So let's try this again and come back in just to make sure. Load game. Boom, and yes, there is a full stamina bar. Wonderful. All right, cool. Now, this is all well and good. You can even see that if I go over here now and go to my player network manager, if I up my vitality or my endurance, watch my max health. It goes up, but the bar doesn't change. So let's make it so when we do this, the health bar and stamina bars also go up to indicate that we have basically experienced a change. So let's go over here to set max health value, and after you set the max health value, that's important, make sure it's after, we call our player UI manager.instance.player UI HUD manager.set max health value and pass our new max health. So do the same thing with stamina, and then every single time you change the vitality or endurance level, your health bars will actually adjust on screen in real time to fit your new stat. So when you level up in the future, make a level up screen, those will expand. So watch this, check this out, boom, right across the screen. And that is awesome. And that does give a nice sense of progression. Now, I'm being a bit nitpicky here, so I'm actually going to resize these just a little bit because I think they're much too large. I like them when they're kind of just like out of the way. So I'm probably going to half the values. I'm just going to change the height here to something like 25 or 30 is fine. Honestly, anything in between that, that should be good. So I'm going to do that, and also I'm going to change the width to again about half, and that should be good. And now if I load back into the game here, yeah, I'm quite happy with that. That looks nice. So again, just to show you one last time, if we were to go over now and modify these stats, as you can see, the bar does expand, and if you change that multiplier, it will change the amount that it expands by. So that is wonderful. It's a nice bit of polish to an already existing system. And now in the next episode, we're going to make it so our player can get damaged and even die. So that'll make it so you actually can make a little platformer then, honestly. You can make some traps and run around and jump off of things and have it so your character can actually die and reset the scene. And of course, we're going to sync all that stuff for multiplayer. And we're going to make sure everything that we've made thus far is working with multiplayer, including our new jump and all that other stuff. Alright guys, so if you made it this far, as usual, I would greatly appreciate a like and a comment. It does genuinely help out the series so much. Thank you to all of you who take the time to do that. And a special thank you to my Patreons. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm really excited to get the next episode out. With that being said, I hope you all have a lovely weekend. I will see you all next week.